about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense.
You're gorgeous,
and
man.
most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host this morning, and we are going to discuss a number of issues that are surrounding our current scenario. We're going to discuss the issues surrounding Obamacare and where that vote runs, because there is trouble afoot in the House and in the Senate, and we want to make sure that you are fully informed and aware of where this thing is headed. The problem, as we see it, is very clear in the sense that what we now have is the Senate is about to try a few parlor tricks to limit the amount of discussion that can be held around the Obamacare discussion. And what they're going to try to do is place the Senate in a position where a 50%, 51 votes out of the 100 will automatically trigger Obamacare into existence again. In other words, they're going to strip the Obamacare limitation out of the continuing resolution budget and go back in and say we're going to reinsert Obamacare, and then it has to go back to the House for a resolution or a debate. And so, what we want to see is that limited. Cruz is asking for a 60-vote majority, which I fully agree with. And that would essentially put or force the Democrats to place their vote, show where they stand on this issue, and not have an opportunity to escape the voters' view of their particular stance on where Obamacare is. Our second segment is going to cover an issue or a letter that was written by Sarah Palin in reference directly and specifically to the Obamacare issue. She recently came out and put out an op-ed, and I want to read it to you because I think it matters, and it's an important statement about where we stand on not only the issue of Obamacare, but generally government as a whole. In other words, this is really more than just Obamacare at stake here, folks. And what we are looking at is the essential loss of our nation if we cannot gain control back of where we stand. Our third segment is going to talk a little bit about immigration and how a couple of issues. One, Biden was down in Texas the other day and actually campaigning for immigration in Texas. Yes, in Texas. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to put the call out to you as to how we're going to resolve that, because and today is a good day for pen and paper. I want to make sure that you've got a pad with you, because this is going to be the issue coming forward after this Obamacare vote. Immigration is right around the corner, and I got to tell you, what they're about to do is allow undocumented immigrants to have 100% amnesty, and this will open up the door to a unlimited flow of illegal immigrants into our nation. And then our fourth segment is going to be about the NSA and how they have been monitoring Americans more so than we ever thought before. The U.S. Justice Department has actually there is an internal oversight group within the FISA courts, and the U.S. Justice Department has never actually investigated the surveillance court complaints. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, because the job of the DOJ, the Department of Justice, is to act as the number one law enforcement agency in the country. And yet when the courts themselves have complained about how the NSA is abusing the privileges and the rights of every single American, the U.S. Justice Department has refused to investigate it. And we're going to talk about that because, honestly, if we can't get the highest law office in the land to investigate what we all know to be the tragedy of what the NSA is doing, then for all intents and purposes, folks, we are beyond salvage in terms of our political scenario. All right, let's get into our first story. Ted Cruz has come out, and this is on Obamacare now, and he has stated that Harry Reid is abusing his power by asking for a simple majority vote on Obamacare. Now, what's happened essentially is this: is a continuing resolution to fund the government. And if you're not a political watcher or what have you, let's understand how this operates. The government's out of money on October 18th. So the House has, which holds the purse strings according to the Constitution, has basically passed a continuing resolution that would fund the government for everything that Obama has passed, without exception, except for Obamacare. And the way that the House is looking at this is they've already passed some, 40 or 42 eliminations of Obamacare. But Harry Reid will never take them up in the Senate. In other words, for 40 separate times, the House has voted to repeal Obamacare. Yet Harry Reid refuses, and I don't understand, quite frankly, how one guy has gotten the power to block a bill from coming up before the entire Senate for discussion and or voting. To me, that sounds almost like we've got two presidents. And Harry Reid, of all people, would be the last guy I would ever look for to be in that position. So what they've done this time is they said, all right, since this happens to be a funding bill for all of the government, period, let's pass everything that Obama wants so that he doesn't have the excuse to say the Republicans have shut government down. And then let's also pull the Obamacare funding out of that bill. So we'll fund 100% of everything that Obama has asked for, with the exception of Obamacare. And that way, the Senate, which is democratically controlled, and the president himself would be the two individuals who at that point would then be responsible for a government shutdown. So the simple truth is this: Harry Reid is now turned around and is trying to play a senatorial parlor trick by basically stating that when they take up this House bill, they can vote for what's called cloture. And a vote for cloture is a vote for Obamacare. And that's a Ted Cruz comment. Because when they end debate on a piece of legislation, then at that point they are required to then go ahead and vote for it, right? So cloture is a technical term for ending the debate on a piece of legislation, and it requires the consent of 60 senators to do that. So what they then do is they go back in and they say, okay, now that we've closed all discussion on this and we can't debate it anymore, now we're up for a 51 plus vote, and that automatically. And so what they'll do is they'll strip the Obamacare piece out of there and then send it back to the House and say, you've got to do this. You've got to pass this. We are going to go into conference on it. And in the end, I suspect, and I pray that it won't happen, but I suspect that Republicans will capitulate. And then we will have not only Obamacare funded, but 100% of everything else that Obama has asked for. And so Harry Reid is utilizing essentially a club, a pistol at the head of everyone in the country in order to fund Obamacare with a simple majority vote. A move that would allow Democrats to change the bill without the Republican support of the Senate. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a tragedy, because where we stand today is in a nation that is so partisanly divided that at this point in time, we no longer have senators and representatives who, for all intents and purposes, believe and stand with America. They don't represent us anymore. They now represent either their own personal interests or their party's interests. Where they represent their own interests is based upon the fact that they've either been corrupted by money, by power, or, quite frankly, by some secret in their closet that they'll do anything and vote any way they're told to keep it silent. And that's not just limited to, there are 435 members of Congress, 100 members of the Senate. I'm not sure I could find 3, maybe 5, in both houses that are worthy of keeping. The rest of them, as far as we're concerned, have completely and absolutely abdicated any level of responsibility that they have to the American people. They have betrayed us in ways that are so heinous, they should be removed from office and criminally charged. That is the truth. Everything else is marketing. The Democrats are charging that Cruz and the other Senate Republicans are ignoring the will of Americans. Well, with all due respect, that's not the truth. the vast amount of Americans right now are, now that they see what Obamacare actually has in it, and this is directly related to Nancy Pelosi's statement that, we have to pass it to see what's in it, right? Now that they actually see what's in it, they don't want it. And the reason they don't want it is because, one, the cost is going to be so expensive. First of all, the president promised that it would be $900 million or $900 billion. He wanted to keep it under that 1 trillion marker so that everybody would say, "Oh, okay, I guess it's not $1 trillion. I guess we'll just go ahead and buy it." It's like saying it's 99 cents instead of $1. Now, America fell for that. But now the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has come out and said the real cost is actually in excess of $3 trillion. The Government Accountability Office has come out and said that Obamacare will bankrupt the nation. Did you hear what I just said? It will bankrupt the nation. And yet, you have people like Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, and quite frankly, guys like McCain and Lindsey Graham, traitors of the Republican Party, who are actually standing there saying, "Yeah, it's a good thing, let's just let it go." I mean, Claire McCaskill from Missouri, an absolute unmitigated traitor to the state of Missouri. You see, the original idea of the Senate, as envisioned by our founders, was not a group of people who doubled the role of the House. The House represents the people individually. In other words, you've got, in your House districting, you've got these relatively small areas so that you can get to that representative theoretically and communicate with that person and say, "Look, this is what I want. This is my request to you as a representative." The Senate, on the other hand, because there was only 100 of them, 2 for every state, the original concept of their role was that they would represent the state's interest, and they were chosen, not voted on, but chosen by and appointed by the state legislatures. Now, the 17th Amendment changed that, and it said that the Senate could be chosen electorally by the people. The problem is that essentially duplicates the role of the House and places the Senate in a position where, one, you have absolutely no contact with your senator. In fact, here in the state of Missouri, Roy Blunt, who's our other traitorous senator, actually doesn't ever even meet with his constituents. All he does is he actually has these meetings he calls an ear. I kid you not. You want to talk about hubris and arrogance? Here's a guy who sends out people who he calls his ear to listen for him to you and then report back, well, this is what they say they want. Now, McCaskill came out the other day and said, "I don't think we should throw tantrums when we lose elections. Not since Ronald Reagan has a president been elected twice with a popular majority vote. I cannot believe that they're going to throw a tantrum and throw the American people and our economic recovery under a bus." Now, with all due respect to you, Ms. McCaskill, first of all, they're not throwing the American people under the bus, nor are they throwing our economic recovery under the bus. In fact, every nonpartisan government agency says that you, the Democrats, are throwing our economic recovery under a bus, that this plan will bankrupt America. You are in violation of what the American people want because everybody is against it. The polls all show that, in fact, listen, folks, a poll came out the other day that says 51% of people actually say you can shut the government down if they will not defund Obamacare. We want you to. That's how desperately they want it wrapped up. That's how desperately they want Obamacare killed. 51% of people are willing to see the government shut down. Now, I don't think government shutdown's a good idea, but I'm telling you that when 51% of America says, if they will not defund Obamacare, then shut it all down, that's a pretty strong mandate. And the truth of the matter is, Every independent financial agency says this is not part of our economic recovery. There has been no economic recovery. 77,000 jobs have been created this year alone. 77% of all the jobs created this year alone are, listen to this one, folks, women waiting tables, minimum wage at best, fast food jobs. 77% of all the women who have been hired in 2013 have been hired to wait tables. That is the truth. Now, if you want to call that an economic recovery, Ms. McCaskill, it's apparent that you have spent so long in Washington as a pampered, perfumed partisan that you no longer understand what it's like to have to determine and decide, should I pay the electric bill or should I pay the gas bill? Should I have hot water this month or should I have heat this month? You are a shameful partisan. You no longer represent the American people. You represent whomever is bought and paid for you by throwing the most gold into your re-election coffer. Your husband is an absolute real estate whore who has stripped and stolen millions upon millions upon millions of dollars from the state that you represent and the federal government in general. And you are an overpaid, overbloated, pathetic, shameful human being. You haven't come up and met your constituents in a dog's age. Neither you nor Blunt. And by the way, Roy Blunt, here's a message to you. If you vote in favor of Obamacare in any way, shape, or form, I will make it my personal mission to make sure that you are unelected in 2016 and that you are removed to retirement. Both you and Claire. You both need to go. We need patriots in this nation. You know, the Texas Attorney General came out the other day and made a statement, which I think was an absolute winner for America. The Texas Attorney General is calling for warriors for freedom. He says that the 10th Amendment is gaining new life in our nation. And he's right. The 10th Amendment that says that every one of the 50 states is an independent government and is not subjected to the abuse and the tyranny from Washington is true. What we need are patriots running for office. He declared that actually Texas should be prepared to go it alone if the U.S. economy collapses. You know why? Because Texas is got the 15th largest economy, folks, in the world. Now, look, for the record, there are some 190 countries in the world. 15th out of that list is Texas. Texas doesn't really need the United States of America. The United States of America definitely needs Texas. And Greg Abbott, he's a Republican candidate for governor, and he's the current AG. He's calling for warriors for freedom. He doesn't advocate secession, and I agree with that. We don't want to secede. What our founders gave us was a tool to step away from the secession talk and and take an alternate route. That route was the nullification of illegal and unconstitutional federal law. A state has the right to say, not only will we not allow that law to be applied here, but you cannot try to send a federal agent into our state to apply it anyway. We won't help you, and if you try, you're subject to arrest. That, ladies and gentlemen, is an independent government. Anything less than that means that we are the vassals of Washington. We are here only as regional managers to do their bidding. And what we do need are warriors for America. We need warriors in every state running for every office, whether it's a county commissioner, whether it is a city councilor, whether it is a dog catcher. We need American warriors, patriots all, who will stand up and do their duty for a short period of time and then go back to whatever their life was before. Not make a career move and get corrupted and polluted, but literally step up, do your duty, and then go back to whatever it was you did before. We need men and women who are willing and capable of being swallowed by the beast as knights. Once inside the belly of the dragon, you draw your sword and you begin to cut from the inside. And when the dragon expels you, then you go home. This guy has already sued the Obama administration 28 times to defend the rights of Texans as guaranteed by the Constitution. I applaud his efforts. But you see, the lawsuits are meaningless when you're having a lawsuit against the federal government that's heard by a federal court, which is under the auspices and the financial fiduciary responsibility back to its own employer. You can't have a court that is in a conflict of interest position listening to a case that involves its employer, its master, its owner. That's why the founders told us that the Supreme Court was not the final arbiter of the Constitution. We and our states are. And the final arbiter of the Constitution is a state that says what the federal government has passed is unconstitutional. Therefore, we nullify it. And we say it is no longer of effect and value in our state. And if you try to implement it anyway, and you send federal agents into our territory to implement a law which we have declared to be null and void, then they are subject to arrest. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a nation and a state which is made up of 50 independent minor governments. You don't see England and France saying that the European Union can institute a rule where some massive European police force wanders in and applies some Euro law, do you? No, because each of the countries in the Eurozone are independent sovereign nations. And there's no difference here. We are independent sovereign states. There's no difference. We are 50 little nations who have gotten together and said, for the purposes of those areas which benefit all of us, like border patrol, security, treaties, the coining of a unique monetary system that's uniform in all 50 states, we allow you to have a limited amount of power. But outside of those delegated authorities, you have none. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. You can find us on the internet by going to americasvoicenow.org. You can also find us on Facebook by going to facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And you can also find this and every other program we do on YouTube at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. If you're listening on KUNQ 99.3, Big Country FM, this is our debut show here. Thank you very much. We appreciate those folks over there who wear cowboy hats by day and tri-cornered patriot hats at night. God bless you. And God bless that station for having the courage to stand up and fight for America. We'll be back in just a moment. Stick with us.